This lesson is special right triangles. We're going to solve for side lengths of 45, 45, 90 triangles and for 30, 60, 90 triangles. A 45, 45, 90 triangle is one like this. We call it 45, 45, 90 because the angle measures are 45 degrees, 45 degrees, and 90 degrees. The way it works is that the hypotenuse is the square root of 2 times as long as a leg. 45, 45, 90 originally comes from a square. If you take a square, all sides are the same, all angles are 90, and then you divide it diagonally. Consider the bottom half here. These two legs are the same, and the 90s were cut in half into 45 degrees apiece. And that's still a right angle. So we have 45, 45, 90 triangles there. The legs are equal, and the hypotenuse is the leg times the square root of 2. So you can make a formula here. The hypotenuse equals the leg times the square root of 2. Substitute in the number you know and solve for the one you don't. So in this example, they give you a 45, 45, 90 triangle where both of the legs are 5 centimeters long. We want to know the hypotenuse. Well, use the formula. The hypotenuse equals the leg times the square root of 2. A leg is 5, so the hypotenuse equals 5 times the square root of 2. And that's our answer, just 5 square root of 2. Don't punch that in your calculator and get some decimal number. You want the exact answer, the exact value. So stay off your calculator here and give the exact value. So this is 5 square root of 2 centimeters. Another kind of special right triangle is a 30, 60, 90 triangle. If you take an equilateral triangle where all sides are the same length and you divide it in half straight down with the altitude there, that makes a right angle here. Remember that in an equilateral triangle, all angles are 60 degrees. So if you just focus on the left side here, this is a 60-degree angle. And at the top, it was divided in half. So the 60 there is divided into 30 and 30. So just half of this is a 30, 60, 90 triangle. The hypotenuse is still the same side length that it was in the triangle. This leg down here has been cut in half. And then the altitude is a different length altogether. So what we end up having is that the hypotenuse is 2 times the short leg. It's twice as long as the short leg. And the long leg is the square root of 3 times the short leg. So we can make sure we identify the short leg and the long leg. In the picture, usually it's obvious, but just in case you don't notice it, the short leg is across from the 30-degree angle, and the long leg is across from the 60-degree angle. The hypotenuse, as always, is across from the right angle. So your formulas look like this. The hypotenuse equals the short leg times 2, and the long leg equals the short leg times the square root of 3. Again, we're not going to punch anything in the calculator because we don't want some decimal answer. Keep the square root of 3 as a part of your answer there. So all you need to know is one side, and you can find the other 3 using these formulas. And if you're given the short leg, substitute it in to find the others. If you're given the long leg or the hypotenuse, find the short leg first. So make sure you know the short leg first, then you can find the remaining side. So consider this example. Here, we have a 30, 60, 90 triangle, and we're given one side is 5 centimeters. That side is across from the 30-degree angle, and the side across from the 30-degree angle is the short leg. I can find the long leg. Long is across from 60. I can find the long leg using the formula long equals short times the square root of 3. So long equals short, short is 5, times the square root of 3. So the long leg is 5 square root of 3 centimeters. I can also find the hypotenuse. The hypotenuse is across from the right angle. The hypotenuse equals the short times 2. So the hypotenuse equals 5 times 2. The hypotenuse ends up being 10. So that's a 10 centimeters there. Long is short times the square root of 3, and hypotenuse equals short times 2. In this example, find the value of A and B. Well, first, what kind of triangle is it? It's a 45, 45, 90 triangle. I'm given one of the legs, find the other leg and the hypotenuse. Well, in a 45, 45, 90, the legs are the same size. Remember, it came from a square, so the legs are the same. So A is simply 7 centimeters. We know that one right off. B is the hypotenuse. So let's use the formula for a 45, 45, 90. Hypotenuse equals leg times the square root of 2. Hypotenuse is B. The leg is 7 times the square root of 2. And there we go, 7 square root of 2. Remember, don't punch that in your calculator. It's just 7 square root of 2, and the label is centimeters. So look at what type of triangle it is, identify the side you know, and then use the formulas to determine the sides that you're missing. The legs equal each other, and the hypotenuse equals the leg times the square root of 2. Here's another example. Find the value of A and B. I'm given a triangle with a right angle and a 60-degree angle. Well, I know that 90 plus 60 plus 30 makes 180 degrees for that triangle. This is a 30, 60, 90 triangle. I know one side is 7 centimeters, and that's across from the 30-degree angle, which means that this is the short leg. So the short leg is 7 centimeters. Now I can find the long leg and the hypotenuse. The long leg is across from the 60-degree angle, so that's A. Use the formula. Long equals short times the square root of 3. The long is A, the short is 7 times the square root of 3, and that's it, 7 square root of 3, and this is centimeters. So that's what A is, 7 square root of 3 centimeters. B is across from the right angle. It's the hypotenuse. Use the formula. Hypotenuse equals short times 2. The hypotenuse is B. The short is 7 times 2. So B is 14 centimeters. Make sure you know what kind of triangle it is. Identify the side you know, and then use the formulas to find the sides you don't know. Long equals short times the square root of 3, and hypotenuse equals short times 2. In this example, find x and y. Well, I have a right triangle with a 45-degree angle, and I know that 90 plus 45 plus 45 makes 180 degrees for the triangle. This is a 45, 45, 90 triangle. The side I know is 9, which is across from the hypotenuse. I need to find the legs. Use the formula. Hypotenuse equals leg times the square root of 2. Hypotenuse is 9. Take your pick on one of the legs. I'll just use x times the square root of 2. Solve for x. Since I have x times square root of 2, I can divide both sides by the square root of 2. Square root of 2's cancel here, so x equals 9 divided by the square root of 2. Now, if you remember in algebra, you can't have a radical in the denominator, so we're going to have to rationalize the denominator. If this is 9 square root of 2, 9 divided by the square root of 2, you need to multiply the top and bottom by the square root of 2. That's how you rationalize the denominator. Multiply the top and bottom by whatever the square root is in the denominator. 9 times the square root of 2 in the numerator, and then square root of 2 times the square root of 2. Anytime you have a square root times itself, it's just whatever that number is. Another way to look at it is the square root of 2 times the square root of 2 is the square root of 4, and the square root of 4 is 2. 9 halves won't reduce, so this is actually finished. So x is 9 square root of 2 divided by 2. Since the legs are the same, then y is also 9 times the square root of 2 over 2. So that one's a bit of an oddball because we had a square root in the denominator. Just remember, multiply the numerator and denominator by whatever that radical is. The square root of 2 over the square root of 2. And remember, square root of 2 times square root of 2 equals 2. You might also see square root of 3 times the square root of 3 equals 3. So be prepared for any of those. Here's another one. Find x and y. We have a right triangle with 60-degree angle. 90 plus 60 plus 30 makes 180 degrees for the triangle. So this is a 30, 60, 90 triangle. I know the side across from 30 degrees, and that's the short leg. The side across from 60 degrees is long, and the side across from 90 degrees is the hypotenuse. So I need to find the long leg and the hypotenuse. Let's do the long leg first. Long equals short times the square root of 3. Long is x, short is 25 times the square root of 3. And that's as far as it'll go. Remember, don't punch that in your calculator. Just leave it like that with the exact value. Now for the hypotenuse, use the hypotenuse formula. Hypotenuse equals short times 2. Hypotenuse is y. Short is 25. And 25 times 2 is 50. So y is 50. Identify the type of triangle, and then identify the side you know. Find the other sides. Long equals short times square root of 3, and hypotenuse equals short times 2. The perimeter of a square is 30 inches. Find the length of segment BC and find the length of segment BD. So we had a square. The perimeter is 30 inches. And then they drew the diagonal BD. Remember, when you take a square and divide it diagonally, it makes 45, 45, 90 triangles. Now, I don't have any side lengths yet, so I need to do some reasoning here to figure out a side length. What'd they give you? Well, they told you the perimeter is 30 inches. The perimeter is the distance around, And in a square, since all four sides are the same length, then I can divide 30 by 4 to get what one of the sides is. 30 divided by 4 is 7.5 inches. So each of these sides of the square is 7.5 inches. And I can see already that I've answered question A because A says find the length of BC, which I've done. The measure of segment BC is 7.5 inches. Then find the length of segment BD. Well, segment BD is the diagonal, which in one of these 45, 45, 90 triangles is the hypotenuse. So use the formula. Hypotenuse equals leg times the square root of 2. The hypotenuse is BD. The leg is 7.5 times the square root of 2. And that's inches. So remember, when you have a square and you divide it diagonally, it becomes a 45, 45, 90 triangle. You can use the hypotenuse equals leg times the square root of 2. And also, we took the perimeter, divided it by 4 to get the length of each side since they were all the same. And that let us finish the question. Last question here. Find the perimeter of an equilateral triangle. Or sorry, not find it, but the perimeter of an equilateral triangle is 120 inches. Find the length of the altitude. So we know the perimeter of this triangle is 120. We're looking for the altitude right here. When you take an equilateral triangle and draw the altitude, remember that divides it into some 30, 60, 90 triangles. So we have 30, 60, 90 triangles here. The altitude is the side that's across from the 60-degree angle, and that's the long leg. So we'll be looking for the long leg of this 30, 60, 90 triangle. Well, right now I don't know any sides, but what I do know is that the perimeter of the big triangle is 120 inches. An equilateral triangle has 3 congruent sides, so to get one of those sides, I can divide 120 by 3 to get 40. So I know that each side of this equilateral triangle is 40 inches. Well, now if I just focus on the 30, 60, 90 triangle, I'll draw the left half here. Here's my 60 degrees. I know the hypotenuse is 40 inches. When you don't know the short leg, find it first. Since I know the hypotenuse, I can find the short leg, which is across from 30. Use the hypotenuse formula. Hypotenuse equals short times 2. The hypotenuse is 40. That equals short times 2. Solve for short. Divide both sides by 2. 40 divided by 2 is 20. And then the 2's cancel over here, which is what I wanted. So the short is 20. Put a 20 right there. Then find the long leg. The long leg is across from 60 degrees. And remember, back in the main picture, that's my altitude. So this will be my final answer. Long equals short times the square root of 3. Long equals short, the short is 20, times the square root of 3, and that's inches. And I finally answered the question. We took the perimeter, divided it by 3 to get each individual side length. That gave us the hypotenuse. We went from hypotenuse to short leg. Since the hypotenuse is short times 2, the short had to be 20. and then long is short times the square root of 3, which is 20 square root of 3. Just remember all of your formulas. In a 45-45-90, hypotenuse equals leg times the square root of 2. And in a 30-60-90, the long is short times the square root of 3, and the hypotenuse is short times 2.